The monitor beeped steady at 2:47 a.m. when the man in the gray maintenance uniform stepped off the service elevator, and nobody in that hospital knew he had come to make sure it stopped beeping forever. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in ordinary people rising to meet extraordinary danger, hit like, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a little hope tonight, and subscribe to Midnight Tales, because stories like this one deserve to be heard. The ICU on the 4th floor of St. Andres Medical Center was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that only exists in hospitals after midnight, when the world outside has gone to sleep and the only sounds left are the hum of ventilators and the soft footsteps of nurses making their rounds. In bed 14, behind a glass partition, lay a man named Ethan Cole, a Navy SEAL who had taken 3 rounds during an extraction gone wrong overseas and had been flown home barely alive. He had survived surgery, survived the flight, survived 72 hours in a coma, but survival, it turned out, was not the same as safety. Somewhere in the chain of command, in rooms far above pay grades and paperwork, someone had decided that Ethan Cole knew something he was never supposed to know, and that the safest thing for certain people was for him to never wake up and tell it. Head nurse Maria Alvarez had been on shift for 11 hours straight when she first noticed the man in the maintenance uniform lingering too long near the supply closet outside the ICU. She almost didn't think twice about it. Hospitals were full of strangers, contractors, transfer staff nobody quite recognized. But Maria had not always been a nurse in a quiet American hospital. 10 years earlier, she had carried a medic's bag through the mountains of a war zone most people only saw in headlines, patching bullet wounds by flashlight, running toward gunfire instead of away from it, learning the particular stillness a person's eyes get right before their body goes into shock. She had left that life behind, or so she believed, trading a rifle green uniform for scrubs and a stethoscope, trying to build something softer, something that let her sleep at night. But some instincts don't retire. They just go quiet, waiting. That night, something in her gut refused to stay quiet. She watched the man's eyes, not the badge clipped to his uniform, not the toolbox in his hand, but his eyes, scanning the room the way a soldier scans a room, cataloging exits, counting witnesses, measuring distance. It was a look she recognized because she had worn it herself once. Her pulse quickened, but her face stayed calm, the same calm she used to deliver bad news to families, the same calm that had once kept her hand steady while mortars fell outside a canvas tent. She paged security using a code only the staff understood, then walked, unhurried, toward bed 14, positioning herself between the glass door and the man lying unconscious inside it. The man in the uniform noticed her. He smiled the practiced, harmless smile of someone used to being underestimated, and he told her he was there to check the ventilation system, that he'd be out of her way in a moment. But Maria had spent enough years reading people who lied for a living to know a rehearsed lie when she heard one. She asked him, gently, which company he was with. He hesitated half a second too long before answering, and in that half second, she saw his hand drift toward his jacket, toward something concealed beneath it, and every year of her old life came rushing back into her spine at once. She did not scream. She did not run. Instead, she stepped fully into the doorway of bed 14, blocking his line of sight to the patient, and in a voice that trembled with adrenaline but did not break, she told him that if he wanted to get to that bed, he would have to go through her first. The man's smile faded. He had expected a hospital nurse, someone soft, someone who would freeze or flee at the first hint of danger. He had not expected a woman who planted her feet like she'd trained for exactly this moment, who watched his hands instead of his face, who did not flinch when he finally revealed the weapon hidden beneath his jacket. For 3 long seconds, the hallway held its breath. Somewhere down the corridor, a food cart rattled. A monitor beeped. And in that suspended, terrifying stillness, Maria thought not of herself, but of Ethan Cole, a stranger to her only hours ago, a man whose chart she had read a dozen times that shift, a man with a wife's photo taped beside his bed and a daughter's crayon drawing pinned to the corkboard, a family waiting at home for him to open his eyes. She thought of every soldier she had ever bled beside in another life, and she understood, with sudden clarity, that she had not stopped being a combat medic when she took off the uniform. She had only been waiting for the moment that required her to remember. She lunged before he could raise the weapon fully, driving her shoulder into his chest with a force that surprised them both, sending them crashing into a supply cart that scattered gauze and syringes across the tile floor. The noise finally shattered the hospital's silence, alarms triggered, doors burst open, and within moments security guards flooded the corridor, but for those first critical seconds, it was only Maria, using every technique she had learned in a war zone half a world away, fighting not for medals or recognition, but for the life of a man she barely knew. The struggle was brief but brutal. Maria took a blow to the ribs that would leave a deep bruise for weeks, but she did not let go of his arm, twisting it with a precision that came from muscle memory older than her nursing career, until security finally pinned the man to the ground and stripped the weapon from his grip. As they hauled him away, shouting into radios and demanding answers, Maria sank against the wall outside bed 14, breathing hard, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed, tears finally slipping down her face, not from fear, but from the overwhelming flood of a life she thought she had buried resurfacing all at once. When Ethan Cole woke 3 days later, groggy and disoriented, the first thing he asked was not where he was or what had happened to him in that firefight overseas. He asked who the nurse was that the other patients kept whispering about, the one who had stood between him and a bullet without knowing his name. When Maria walked into his room that afternoon, still wearing the fading bruise along her ribs beneath her scrubs, Ethan looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them that needed no words, the quiet recognition of two people who had both once run toward danger instead of away from it, who understood the weight of protecting someone else's life at the cost of their own safety. Over the following weeks, as Ethan recovered, the two of them talked for hours during quiet night shifts, swapping stories from opposite ends of the same kind of war, and something in Maria that had gone numb for years slowly began to soften and heal alongside him. The investigation that followed uncovered a corruption scandal reaching further than either of them could have imagined, but on the personal, human scale that mattered most, what people remembered was simpler, a tired nurse who refused to let fear make her small, who chose, in the space of 3 heartbeats, to be brave for a stranger. If this story moved something in you tonight, if it reminded you that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage when the moment demands it, please take a second to like this video and leave a comment. I read every single one, and I would love to hear which part touched you most. And before we close this chapter together, I have one small, special request. Comment the word Guardian below if you believe there are quiet heroes walking among us every single day, people who have already fought their war and would fight it again for a stranger without a second thought. Maria Alvarez never wore a medal for what she did that night. She never gave an interview, never sought recognition. She simply returned to her rounds the next evening, checking charts, adjusting 4 lines, doing the quiet, unglamorous work of saving lives one shift at a time, because that had always been who she was, long before anyone called her a hero, and long after the cameras and the questions faded away. Somewhere out there tonight, in a hospital corridor much like that one, another nurse is standing quiet watch over another sleeping stranger, ready, if the moment ever comes, to remember exactly who they used to be. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't scroll away without subscribing to Midnight Tales. There are more stories like Maria's waiting for you, stories of courage hiding in plain sight, and I'd be honored to have you along for the next one.